Spanish. Just, vamos a tener un diálogo ahora en...
We are now going to talk in English, and afterwards we'll have time for questions. The questions are already arriving, so I switch to English.
I have a question which is almost a methodological question, right? You were speaking here of 7 civilizations. You speak about 7 civilizations in your book. Why these cases and not other cases? I know you touched upon this when you were talking about, your editor, etc. But why focusing on these specific civilizations? Are we missing anything by not including other cases?
Yeah, that's a good question, and another way of phrasing it is, why is Spain not there? And apologies. Had the book been longer, had the editor been more generous, Spain would have been there. However, so first of all, this is my methodology. I actually talk to historians and economic historians about their idea of a golden age, where you have these massive amounts of innovations in different sectors at the same time. And I got different answers from different people, but these 7 were on everybody's list. So these were the ones I had to deal with, I thought. So that's one reason why I did that. But I'd be happy to write a sequel with more civilizations. But it's also interesting with Spain, for example, making guest appearances in so many of these, in all of these cultures, because you can see how the School of Salamanca has been absolutely essential when it comes to our concepts of law, of economic freedom, individual rights, how the La Casas and the debates about the rights of the Indians, that in 1550 in Valladolid, how do I pronounce it? Something like that, instituted by the Spanish government. That was the first time we started talking about human rights for real, and it's there. And obviously with the adventurers, Spain built the first era of globalization together with the Portuguese. However, this does not make a civilization. It's guest appearances here and there. And that's my point when I write this book. It's not sort of secluded cultures here and there. It's cultures constantly in dialogue with one another, learning from and picking up the best bits and pieces from other places. And the thing specifically with Spain that made it difficult to introduce it here is that while there were amazing intellectual and artistic creativity during the Spanish Golden Era, it was hard to see the same thing in the economy, throughout the economy, how it raised living standards for people more broadly. So in that case, it was more difficult to turn that into one single chapter.
Mm-hmm. I was not thinking of Spanish civilization, whatever, per se. I was thinking Ottoman, maybe, the Ottoman Empire.
Yeah, that's right. And
so
some of and India, sort of the Indus Valley civilizations, there are many others that could have been there, for sure.
Your book identifies common factors in the rise and fall of these 7 golden ages, right? For instance, I think one big concept here is the openness, right? So that you have discussed in previous books as well, right? Openness to trade, openness to people, to ideas. So I have a question that is almost like a double question, right? What lessons can we draw here to address current global challenges you were discussing a little bit, and specifically, and this is almost unavoidable, right? As we speak, bombs are raining all over the Middle East, right? Any specific lessons or findings in your book that are suitable for this situation? Anything useful to solve this crisis? However we define crisis, everything is very blurry, still we don't know what's going to happen, etc., right? So how would you apply your findings there? It's very specific. Very specific.
I was asked this again and again in this past few days. What's the closest parallel to what we're living through right now, and especially when it comes to the Middle East? And the good thing about writing about 2,500 years of history is that there's always one parallel somewhere. I would say the closest we get to the Middle East is Europe in the 16th and 17th century, with many different mostly authoritarian states fighting over religion, or at least that's what they claim to be fighting over endlessly, constantly, and worried about their neighbors and their rivals. And that's worrying because it took a long time for Europe to get out of it. On the other hand, one result was the birth of the Enlightenment and saying that, let's stop doing this, right? Let's stop trying to enforce our ideas on others and live and let live. And we got the Enlightenment in the modern world. Not certain that that's going to happen right now. And the difference right now is that we also have a superior power trying to intervene from abroad. And I couldn't be more happier than if this ended with peace and freedom for the Iranian people. And actually, Iran is in the epilogue where I'm saying that this could be one of the great golden ages in the future if they are ever liberated, because Iranians are tremendously successful everywhere in the world, but in Iran. So there's something about that. However, wars are messy, and we have no idea how this is going to end. It might end in new dictatorship, more chaos. It could mean that the whole country falls apart completely. That's also something that we learn from history. Good intentions, if that's what it is not enough, because the proof is in the pudding. So, but I would add this, something important related to world orders is that the traditional American world order is falling apart as we speak. And no matter what happens in this war, this is suddenly a period where we've begun to abandon the rules-based order and instead engage in more of a might is right system. And while toppling dictators is one thing, threatening your allies in NATO, in Canada and Denmark and taking Greenland, that's exactly how Athens began to fall apart as a great power when they run the Delian League, which was kind of the NATO of its day. Because Athens was seen as a reliable partner, so everybody wanted to cooperate. But the moment when Athens got military superiority, they became tempted to use it, even against their own member states, and even attack them to acquire their mineral resources, their silver mines, and so on. And that was the moment when other Greek city-states began to see that, oh, look, we might have to look for new friends over here. And that was not peak Athens, that was the beginning of their long decline.
Speaking about things falling apart, many of the civilizations that you study in your book collapse when they stop being open, when they become closed or inward-looking. You gave us some examples in your talk. To what extent do, on the one hand, internal social, political, economic dynamics, and on the other hand, external pressure or constraints, if you want, explain this decline? I mean, is one more decisive than the other? Both play the same role?
Yeah.
Internal and external.
Both played an incredibly important role historically, and often in an interaction. Often some kind of foreign threat that makes you more of a Spartan, because suddenly the world is dangerous, so why not hide from that world? And then you build, it's like the individual fight or flight instinct. When we see a predator or a lion, if you've done that recently, we want to flee or fight. And it's the same thing with societies. We want to sort of fight or build walls against the rest of the world. I think that's the strongest temptation. But then obviously there's also this slow, ongoing accumulation of special interests that are very happy with where they are right now. They've built their political or economic power on a particular system, and then they're not happy with novelty, threatening that, and that's one reason that even very stable societies, after a while, Mansur Olson wrote a great book about this, The Economist, was it The Rise and Decline of Nations, something like that, which pointed out that eventually accumulate so many special interests and regulations that it's hard to be open to new ideas, new technologies, new business models. And so it could happen from a slow internal process as well.
If there's one, you were mentioned before, imitation and innovation, but I would like to talk a little bit about openness as well, right? If there's one single broad factor that explains why civilizations thrive and flourish, it's openness, right? Your book. However, it seems that nowadays we're not going in that direction. Countries are less and less open, it seems, right? So countries try to close borders. They prevent ideas from spreading, especially internally, ideas coming from abroad, prevent people from entering countries, prevent goods and services from flowing freely. Does all of this point to a collapse, to use your own words, of our civilization in the near future, you think? And by the way, which civilization will be that is collapsing? Is the West or is European? What is that?
Yeah, how encouraging. So I think that I think we've all become more Spartan in recent years because we've had a pretty bad run with sort of endless wars, geopolitical strife, the pandemic, Putin. The world seems like a dangerous place, and it seems like a reasonable solution is just to shut the world out, right? So and some build a political career on this. and you know, that's what Trump said. I'll protect you against a dangerous world. It's crazy out there, but I'll fix it and I'll build those walls and I'll impose tariffs on everybody else. So we do have that tendency and it exists everywhere. Unfortunately, it's self-defeating because it only means that you deny yourself access to the best technologies and the best competition and the best people from other places. So it is a dangerous temptation, but it will be very powerful here in the longer run. However, I would point out that you remember America did this in 1930 as well. They imposed tariffs on the rest of the world. And then we all imposed our own tariffs. We didn't do that this time around. That's the difference. So it seems like we're learning something from history, that a trade war is a strange war where we take turns punching ourselves in the face. And we have it seems like we've decided that, okay, let the Americans punch themselves in the face and we'll try to avoid it. We have big sort of swing states like Brazil and India who have been engaging in more trade deals recently, and the European Union with the Mercosur agreement, the Indian agreement. It seems like we realize that, you know, the world is big and most new ideas and technologies will appear elsewhere. And if we're not open to them, somebody else will use them and they will be the next winners, which brings us to the idea, the question, which one will fall first? And good question, difficult question, because it's all down to choices. It's down to the battle of ideas. This is not set in stone by any stretch. So it's about our policies and what we decide to do. It's been very... there's a whole genre of thinkers and pundits who say that Europe is over and that sort of we're on decline. And sure, there are some signs we're old and we have a lot of wealth to protect. We're more fearful about what to lose. On the other hand, it seems like we have managed with a couple of amazing things. We've gone through the Euro crisis, the pandemic, and Putin's invasion of Ukraine and a whole energy system that has been changed. And we're actually still standing and adjusted for purchasing power parity. Europe as a whole has grown almost as fast as America since the turn of the millennium. And that's mostly because we have the Central and Eastern European economies that have been integrated into Europe. It's that's a remarkable achievement, and I think there's still so much potential in there. And I think perhaps this crisis is the very thing that makes us realize that there are some things we have to do when it comes to deregulation, when it comes to deepening the internal market to actually proceed. So I'm not giving up on Europe. I'm a little bit more worried about America right now.
We'll go back to that. But so, if you, I mean, this is a hard exercise, right? But if you had to choose one policy area, just for lack of a better term, to work on in order to help our societies thrive, for instance, trade or education or institutions of governance, anything that you mentioned, or maybe something different, some kind of normative or cultural change or something like that. Yeah. Which area has the greatest potential to accomplish this goal of like helping our societies thrive? You can only choose one.
Yeah. In that case, then I will cheat by having a macro policy, which is pooling resources and knowledge and capital. Referring back to the European question, we're 500 million people. But we don't have a functioning internal market because the capital market and the service market is closed down by national regulations and different standards of regulation. If we could just get that going, then we'd have 500 million people who, with their knowledge, with their entrepreneurial capacity, will have a new Roman Empire where ideas that appear somewhere on the continent will rapidly be used elsewhere. We will pool capital so that young European entrepreneurs don't have to go to America to fund their businesses, and we'll have huge new service companies that will appear because with a push of a button they'll have access to the entire European market. That's the one macro policy that I would push for to actually make Europe a reality.
Right. It's not really cheating. I think it's okay.
Thank you.
As one.
Because, you know, the good news is that I meet so many talented young European entrepreneurs. The bad news is that I meet most of them in California. And it's not because they dislike Europe. They love it here. But that's where the capital is. But we have that capital if we could only pool it.
Yeah, it's there. I would like to address something. I don't know how much you touch upon this in your book. How to explain this? The concept of, or the idea of denial. And why do I mean by that? You were mentioning before in your talk this thing of optimism, right? It's not just, the inventors or the institutions. You were saying it's just kind of a state of mind, if you want, like collective or something like that. What are we as citizens? Are not as inventors, not as anything else, like people who just go about with our lives in daily life. Are we realistic when it comes to identify social, if you want, civilizational problems and their solutions? So what is the role that we have to have as citizens, right? It became almost a truism, a stereotype, what the former president of the European Commission, Jean-Claude Juncker, said famously once, we know what to do, but we don't know how to get reelected if we do it, right? So this is just one of the many examples, right? So are we, I don't know if to say responsible, or we see clearly as citizens the problems that are there and how to fix them?
No, we don't. But few do. I mean, few people spend their time thinking about institutions and public policy and fiscal responsibility, because we only see the other side of the sausage machine in a way, rather than the few people are in the privileged position, but also kind of depressing position of thinking of the whole sausage-making process involved in there. So we're definitely not realistic. But the bigger problem is that many who are involved and who should know better, they are in denial about these things. And this is a clear traditional sign of a decline and fall of a society. We live beyond our expenses. We think more about the consumption than of the production. We don't want to go through the hassle of creative destruction, which is really what we need to come up with new and better business models, and then we have to let the old ones go. If you're too comfortable, you don't want to pay that price to get it done. And that's really, I think, a duty of good leadership, to talk seriously in an adult way about those challenges, about what we can and what we cannot do, that there are no perfect solutions, only trade-offs, and that there are some prices that we're going to have to pay for a better result tomorrow. And no, right now we are in denial over that, and that's a shame.
And I was also thinking of maybe not just your metaphor of the sausage machine is very clear, right? Because it's you can see the image, right? But before we were chatting a little bit about this this experience that I had in your home country in Sweden when I was a visiting professor there. I was living in Lund. Lund, as you know, is a university city. It's not too diverse in that sense, but I was living in Malmo, which is very, very close, right? And Malmo is a whole different universe, right? It's very, very, especially after the huge migration in the 2010, after war in Syria, et cetera, right? Yeah. And I saw there are things that are like straight from a Hollywood movie, right? So of shootings and dead people and things like that. And when I went to work the next day after seeing all these things to Lund, and I was talking to my colleagues at the university, they were telling me that I was inventing this. So no, you haven't seen this. Or if you have seen it, you don't understand, you're not Swedish, right? And what I was trying to say is like, well, I saw that with my own eyes. Yeah. And I have some fair knowledge of what the country, how the country is run, et cetera, right? So I mean that, right? So sometimes don't we have this kind of mindsets or ideas or prejudice or ideologies that prevent us from seeing reality and having an honest conversation on social issues or social problems, like consequences, good and bad, of migration, for instance, right? What's your take on that?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes we do live in different realities, even though it might just be a few blocks away from each other. And actually, that dialogue, I mean, I've lived in Malmö for 5 years, and that kind of dialogue could have been appearing between people in different parts of the city as well.
Right.
So I think that it's so difficult to rise above your local everyday experience. And for obvious reasons, we are where we are. And then we get most of the information about what is going on in the world through a very distorted lens of media and social media. And that really doesn't help us to understand what is going on in other places. So I think that's a good point, and it's well taken. That's one reason why we need more communication, we need more dialogue, we need to be open to the experiences of other people who have seen other things rather than thinking they invented it or saw it in a Hollywood movie.
Yep. Okay, my last question, because we have lots of questions from the audience. You mentioned in your talk, we live in ours is a remarkable golden age, if I'm quoting properly. But if we can keep it, this is what you said, right? So why would we not keep it? Okay. Yeah. So why are the obstacles that you see to keep? I mean, we can be talking for hours about this. Just pick a few of them that you see as an obstacle to keep our golden age, our current golden age.
Yeah. First of all, let me be a little bit hopeful. I think that this golden age we're in right now is different from all the previous ones because they were all regional by nature. When West Rome fell, that was the end of it. I mean, people lost the ability to build in concrete, and they lost the knowledge about so many different trades. They had to be relearned 500 years later, rediscovered. They lost the ability to build oxygen-tight containers, so they had to drink sour wine for several hundred years. If that's not the end of the civilization, I don't know what is. The difference this time around is that even if Spain or Sweden or America were to disappear, all that knowledge, all the technological achievements of our countries would not disappear, because we live in a global civilization. Not when it comes to our values, not when it comes to our policies, but when it comes to state of knowledge, because we can instantly communicate with everybody else. And that brings me hope, I must say, for humanity as a whole, that even if we fail miserably in certain places, as long as some places stay creative, we can learn from them and pick up their best ideas, as long as we stay open to them. So that's a reason why I don't think that, I mean, barring a nuclear apocalypse or something like that, I don't think we will lose this entire civilization now. But however, that's not great comfort for the place that will fail in the shorter run. And how might that happen? What are the tendencies? Well, I think that it comes with this loss of cultural self-confidence, this loss of excitement over new technologies and new businesses and new solutions to old problems. When we just become fearful of it, we won't see new generations entering into them. They won't get the capital and the cultural approval when they do. And that's the beginning of at least a slower decline, and some sort of decline once that happens. So to me, it's incredibly important to keep that sort of the spirit of excitement over the next step. I even think it's a duty to be a bit optimistic, even when things seem a little bit scary, because I think pessimism might be a self-fulfilling prophecy. And then if you combine that pessimism with layers of regulations that makes it harder and harder to test new things, if you then, on top of that, have a situation where you build up huge debts, which are increasingly difficult to repay, which means that you're in the hands of the international markets, then a slow decline might turn into a quick decline. You know, that's the Hemingway's response to how did you go bankrupt? Well, in two ways. First gradually, and then suddenly.
That's great. I think what you were describing before, we can call it like a reservoir of hope or something like that. I want to be as optimistic as you with this. Okay.
Oh, thank you. I think Karl Popper said that in his last lecture, or his last interview. We have a duty to be optimists. I know it's not easy every morning when we wake up, but if we become pessimists, we give up. You have to think that there's a way out. Not complacent optimists, but sort of we have it within our hands.